Okay, so we're recording now, Madeleine, and it's so nice to see you again. We've only known each other briefly, intense as it was the first time, which is lovely to hear your story and how we came to connect with you. Obviously, to do with well-being and everything, to do with an individual's well-being. You know, I find it, if I'm honest, I found it really hard to write an introduction to this because it feels very unnatural to want to ask you to relive what's happened and at the age that it happened to you at. So look, I'm just going to leave it open. I would love for people to hear your story because I know you like people to hear your story. And if they can take one thing out of it in terms of resilience, or what I'd like to call this is turning pain into positivity, then they will learn it from you. So,
and to be honest, I don't really relive it anymore when I tell my story. It doesn't take me back to a place of trauma, and I couldn't share it with you or write about it, speak about it if I wasn't okay.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I guess it's over to you in your own words. If you could tell us about you, Madeleine.
So I, up until about a year ago, was a psychotherapist. I had been for about 12 years. And before that, I'd worked women's aid and rape crisis for a long time. And I had published my memoir, Unbroken, about just over 3 years ago. And I was being asked to speak more and more. So I made the decision to stop working as a psychotherapist and focus on speaking. And I share my story. So my story, to put it very briefly, is that I chose to forgive the two men who gang raped me when I was just 13 years old. And so my story, my book is really about my journey of surviving, healing, forgiveness, transformation, and hope.
Madeleine, if I may, for context and content, can I take you back to what happened? Can you talk us through so that everyone can get an idea of what you went through?
I had this friend at school who was just like the one that everybody wanted to be. You know, she was really popular and had better clothes and shoes and more makeup and jewellery. It was just really cool. And my mum was unwell at home, so things at home were quite tricky. And she said, let's go on a night out. And I just said, yeah. But we both, we did something which I'm sure a lot of people have done. We lied about where we were staying. So her mum was away and we were meant to be with her grandma, and we both told her grandma and my mum that we were at each other's houses, and we went back to her mum's empty flat and somehow managed to buy a bottle of vodka, which we took to a local cafe in North London. Then we drank it, and having never drunk before, I got sick very quickly, obviously, threw up everywhere, and we were kicked out. And two of the young men from our table came and put us into the black taxi and took us back to her mum's flat. And it just became very obvious very quickly that, you know, they weren't there to take me out of the clothes that I'd been sick in. They weren't there to let me sleep off the alcohol or, you know, recover. They were there for something else.
And these are two random guys that, I mean, the first part of your story is nothing that a teenager wouldn't, you know, remember their first experience with alcohol. And you didn't know these guys from...
I knew one of them, actually. One of them lived next door to another friend from school. They were both American. They were sons of diplomats. My friend's father was American, so she knew a lot of these people. They went to American school in London, but they were only in London maybe like a couple of years before they were moved on again to another posting somewhere. So I knew one of them kind of well, not relatively well, and the other one I had just heard of. I hadn't met him before.
And you find yourself in an environment where you felt incredibly unsafe. Were you aware of what was going on around you?
Yeah, in the beginning I thought we were just kind of joking around, and when I realised what was going on, I started to fight back. But when I fought back, the violence really escalated. So a lot of the time, there's many different ways that somebody can respond to trauma. I just froze. I just let them do whatever they wanted to do, because I really thought, especially one of them, I looked into his eyes, that he could kill me, and just to let them get over and done with. And I, during the night, during the event, I literally just left my body, which I know now, being a therapist, is a normal situation a normal reaction to a very abnormal situation is to leave the scene of the crime, to take your mind or your body away, to disconnect. And that's really what saved me. I think if I stayed in my body, I wouldn't have been here.
I don't know what to say. I can't imagine. I don't know how much detail you want to go into. It's a subject that must be incredibly personal to you.
Yeah, I'm really okay to talk about whatever you need to ask, or, you know, I always find it fascinating, especially when men want to interview me, just to see where they come from, and I can sense how awkward it is for you as well. But I'm really, if I wasn't okay, I couldn't speak about it.
No, and so you were going through the ordeal. You know, it just feels unnatural to take, because I'm talking to you now as a 13-year-old child.
Mm-hmm.
That in my head, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And I'm not. Obviously, you've I would say moved on. I don't know what moving on is. But how did the ordeal finish? What happened? How did you come round? How did you?
Well, the very last thing I remember is that one of them held, that I call them the worst one, and the one that wasn't as bad. The worst one held his knife against my throat, and he told me if I told anyone, they would kill me. And I believed them. And then they literally put me back in the bed and left. And when I woke up the following morning, my friend was now in the bed next to me. She'd been put into a different bedroom, and she hadn't been touched, and I had lots of injuries on my body. And we both decided in that moment not to speak about it, to clean up the flat, clean up my body, and just leave, because, you know, I'd lied to my parents, I'd bought alcohol, I'd met boys. I was already listening to the so many messages that are around there. I was already thinking it myself. What did I expect? You know, this was my fault. I brought it on myself, and I just had to push it as far away from my mind as I possibly could.
And all those feelings happened instantly, did they? Straight afterwards, you went into thinking about appearance, how you felt guilty, how it was your fault.
I think I was concerned that we would get into trouble because we'd lied and we used her mum's flat. We weren't meant to be there. And we bought alcohol. Yes, we were worried that we would get into trouble because it was before mobile phones. Nobody could track me. Nobody knew where I was. So yeah, I felt guilty. But that is subliminally fed into our consciousness. You know, I wasn't aware of rape culture messages at 13, but I had bought into them.
I know, but from listening to it as a third party who's unconnected, when you say you could have got into trouble, you could argue that you have been in the most, you've just come out of a situation where you were in the most trouble.
Yes.
Of your life, and yet something was even greater than that. So
I think also because my mum was bedridden at the time, and I was worried that if I told her what happened, it would make her sicker, or she could die from the shock. So I guess looking back, I wanted to protect my mum as well, because we had housekeepers looking after us. There were nurses looking after my mum. My dad was juggling work and 5 kids, and I just thought, don't want to upset things at home as well.
Almost still putting everyone else in front of the ordeal that you've just been through.
And it's normal to numb out, to forget it, to push trauma far from your mind. I know now, as I've worked for a psychotherapist for years, it's a perfectly normal reaction to just like put it there, put it way out of your consciousness.
Yeah, I want to come on to that later because people deal with it in very different ways. Just going back to that time when you woke up, you were feeling bad emotionally, mentally, and of course physically with what's just happened to you. Was there a state of confusion over your friend was there and not touched and not and you felt even more alone or victimized? What?
I think I was just confused for years. I mean, I never called it rape, even though now when I look back it was very violent and they attempted to take my life. I just undermined it and just was a bad experience. That's all I put it down to. It was only a few years later I was chatting to a friend and she said, well, that is rape. And I went, is that rape? And then that word would just go round and round in my head all the time. Was that rape? Was I raped? So yeah, it's amazing, the mind, how it can just numb out completely and shut down.
When you could label it rape and when you felt strong enough to label it rape, did that help you put it into a box that went, okay, that's not my fault?
No, not for a long time, long time. It took me years and years to realise it was nothing to do with me. And I now know without a doubt 100% of rapes are caused by rapists, nothing else. There was never anything to do with me, but for years I always thought, yeah, I put myself in that situation.
I mean, the father in me wants to just ask you straight away, did they get caught? Did they get their punishment?
Well, I never spoke about it. It took me 3 years to speak about it, and by that time they would have left the country. And, you know, when I finally told my parents, I couldn't speak it verbally because I literally went mute. I hardly spoke for 3 years. I wrote it down in a note and I left it on my pillow before I went to school. And my dad, they called the other girl, they called my friend, and she said it hadn't happened like I said it had. So I felt very betrayed by her. Taken me 3 years to find my voice. My dad still wanted to go to police. My mum was really quiet. And it took me many years to understand that there was a reason for her silence. She told me long after my dad had passed away that as an 8-year-old she had been raped as well, and she was terrified of me going to the police because she didn't want me to be examined like she'd been examined. I now know, because I've worked at Rape Crisis for years, that I wouldn't have been examined 3 years later. The physical evidence, you know, that wouldn't have been there now anyway. But she was never able to tell my dad, even the whole time he was alive, 5 kids together, nothing. But at that point, I thought, well, my friends betrayed me, and I thought my mum didn't believe me.
I don't know where to start. Again, I just don't know where to start, because to have to keep it to yourself. I mean, whenever we go through times of great change, whether it really positively or really negatively, I think those are the times where we need to speak out. And you had to leave a note on your pillow.
Yeah.
So talk me through those 3 years. What were you?
Well,
everyone's got an inner critic, but
I know now, you know, what we don't speak about, it's got to come out somehow.
Yeah.
It's got to leak out of our bodies. I developed anorexia. I started to use drugs and alcohol to numb out. I developed depression. I had fears, phobias. I became really promiscuous at all these parties I was going to, and I attempted suicide. So when I was in hospital, they put it down to the fact that my mum was ill, because I had had contact with them when I was about 11. I'd had epilepsy due to the worry that she was going to die. And they just put it down. It was the same pattern again, the dynamics in the family. And I just think now, surely it must have been obvious. I asked my notes actually when I was writing my book, which was difficult to read, but I wanted to see if they had any idea what had happened to me. You know, I was a fairly normal girl, turned into traumatized one overnight, but there was nothing in my notes to suggest they had any idea. They just put me down as a depressed teenager with an eating disorder.
That's incredibly frightening.
It is, yeah.
In terms of misdiagnosis.
Absolutely, and at school as well, you know, I went from a normal good student to one that just flunked school. I didn't come out of any qualifications because I just couldn't wait to leave. And no understanding, no looking beyond the behaviour, just, you know, labelling me. And I wonder how many people that happens to as well.
Yeah, I mean, the time at school for me, and I'm sure everyone, is like a big footprint in the sand for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. You know, I remember the odd name here and there being called out, and if I hear those words now, it sends a shudder through me. So it's almost that what happens in those years is escalated, is made. I don't know, if you haven't succeeded or you've been a certain way in those years, you think that's just going to follow you through life. What were you left with in terms of insecurity then?
Oh, I had no self-belief, no self-worth, no self-confidence. I thought I was contaminated, dirty, disgusting. I had just filled with self-loathing. I really hated myself.
At a time where you should be loved and cherished and being told, you know, I'm always here for you through life.
Yeah.
I'm with you. You was that the time that you were most on your own?
Yeah, because I couldn't communicate. I really just turned into, my family used to call me, they didn't know what happened to me, used to call me the ice maiden. So that just kind of describes how much I had shut down, how much I couldn't feel, I couldn't think. I just kind of grunted my answers, you know, just going through the motions. They had no idea. My mum told me years later that she tried to take me to therapists to speak, and they said, well, your daughter won't speak, we can't help her, but we can help you. So my mum ended up going to see one of the therapists, but I just wouldn't talk. I was so scared of revealing anything that they might find out and come and kill me, I guess.
So that was the fear. It wasn't, I'm going to tell someone they're going to help me. It was, I'm going to tell someone and my situation is going to be worse.
absolutely, because I really believed their threats that if I told anyone, they would find me and they would kill me.
And your friend?
It's interesting with all the social media and everything. I've never found her, and none of my friends have stayed in contact with her, and I don't know where she is, what her name is even now. So, but we just went back to school as normal, and we just pretended nothing had happened. And then I left school, and we just went our separate ways.
It's hard to go back to school normally. So you went through that period of, and I've listened to a few of your bits before. It's funny, you get engrossed in it, and you went through a period of rebellion. You say that if your mum told you not to go out, you would go out, you'd do more. So when did that soften?
Well, my behaviour was really bad, and they discovered I was smoking a lot of dope, and they suggested it would be a good idea to go away. So just before my 17th birthday, I went to Israel for a year. I spent 6 months on a kibbutz and 6 months in Ashkelon. And it was in Ashkelon that I met Stephen, who's now my husband. We've been married 2 years, something like that. So we've been together about 37 years, quite a few years. And he was the first person that I just felt safe with, I guess. And he's very opposite to me then. He's very grounded and calm, and I just trusted him. I knew that I could be safe with this man. And really with his love, that's what started to melt my iciness, I guess. He showed me that I was lovable, which I couldn't understand. I would drive him mad. Why do you want to be with someone like me? I just couldn't get it. But he was just always so reliable, dependable, and it's never really changed much in all the years. He's very, very even keel, takes a lot to rile him. I'm sure I've tested him over the years, but he's just, I just saw that I was lovable, and then I could give love back to him, but I could slowly learn to love myself and, like myself to start with, and love myself, realized that, if this man could love me, he must see something in me.
It took you a while to find that love. Do you think did you not have that when you were a child after the event then? And my other question leading on is, if you did have that, would it have sped up the healing process, bearing in mind it was love and trust and everything that helped you?
Yeah, I always knew that I was loved as a child, but I think I was just so traumatized I couldn't let any of that in. I had just shut myself off. So this was an outside source from the family, I guess, and it was somebody different. It was just hard at that time, especially because I just thought my mum didn't believe me as well. So that was difficult those years. I couldn't allow their support or loving.
Before we move on too far into the future and talk about your bounce back, your resilience, whatever we call it. Mm-hmm. Madeleine, if you had 5 minutes now with the two men, mm-hmm. what would you say to them?
Well, the reason that I ended up forgiving them in my heart was that I wanted to understand, and I would really want to understand, because I don't think that people are born rapists or murderers or arsonists. I believe that we're shaped and conditioned by our life, our experiences, and I would just be intrigued and wonder. I want to understand where did they ever think that was okay to treat a human being? Where did they learn this? What did they see? What did they experience in their own life? Have they ever thought about it? Do they ever regret what they did? Because I think, as I've done as good a job as I can do to live my life as well as possible, but they have to live with what they did to me, and I'm sure that must impact on them. You can't hurt a human being like that and not have an impact on them as well. It's just as hard, I think, to be a perpetrator, maybe even harder for them to live with what they did to me, whether they become conscious of it or not. And if they don't become conscious of it, it's going to affect them on some other level. It will leak out of their system in some other way.
Yeah, it's an interesting way, because you sound like you have forgiven them. Was that a conscious effort? Did someone say, look, we need to try and do this because then you can move on? No?
I was a complete accidental forgiver. I never intended to, because I was filled with hate and anger and revenge. And
no one can blame you for that.
And I fantasized about somebody kidnapping them and beating them up, tying them up, raping them for 5 hours on end like they had done to me. But it was when my eldest daughter became 13, I was having therapy, all the memories came back, nightmares, flashbacks, and I just thought I need to clean this up once and for all. And very near to the end of those 3 years, my therapist just suggested to me one day, maybe they weren't born rapists. And at first I was completely outraged, but then it started that process of wanting to understand, and how could they behave like that? What had gone on in their life? I do believe that hurt people. And it just led me on this path of inquiry. And then I somehow started to feel compassion in my heart towards them. And I realized to totally accept all that had happened to me, I could also take this one step further, and I could choose to forgive them, just to make peace with my past. So it was never about them. It was like for giving me a better chance, because if I held on to all the anger, they don't have any idea. It doesn't hurt them in any way. It's only going to impact on my husband and my kids. And I very nearly didn't become a mum. I reversed my decision on motherhood because I thought giving birth was going to be like being raped again. So Stephen knew initially, I told him I would never have children, but clearly I have 3 girls now, so I got over that one. But I just really always wanted to understand, and forgiveness, it was my key to freedom. Yeah, it just brought in so much more peace, and it's a lot easier living my life like this rather than a hateful, vengeful heart. It's much easier to have a peaceful heart.
Yeah, they say don't hurt yourself to hurt others, because it really does.
Yeah.
Right, you've got 3 daughters, and how protective are you as a parent?
Yeah, well, I'm also a Jewish mother, so even more protective, overprotective. But I saw as actually, becoming a mum was the start of my healing journey, because it was a huge decision that I reversed not to become a mum. So that sent me on this journey of personal development and loads of different courses, and done so much work on myself, personally developed. But I was very paranoid having 3 girls. I think, why would life give me 3 girls?
Yes.
All things to give me life. Thank you.
What was the answer to that? Why did life give you 3 girls? What have you found the answer to be?
I don't know. No idea. But, I've always been very, very honest with them. I've always told them exactly what happened. A kind of age-appropriate language.
Yeah.
For a long time, they knew that 2 boys hurt Mummy very badly. But as they got older, they knew more details. And then I talked to them about consent and rape and domestic abuse, and to kind of protect them. But it was only really when I had my kids that I saw, if I'm not careful, I could project all my fear onto them. And then what would be the point of having them? So the main example, which really woke me up, when Anna was going to high school, they call it high school in Scotland, secondary school, she wants to take the public bus, and I said, no way, I'm going to drive you to school like I've driven you every day. But she kind of wore me down and said all her friends are taking the bus, and
I'm the only one.
So I said, okay. So I gave her a rape alarm in one pocket, and I gave her money. I told her not to listen to her music with her earbuds in, and then we lived near to the bus stop, so I watched her jump on the bus, and then I jumped in my car and I drove all the way behind that bus to school. And then I just thought, you are crazy. What are you doing? How will they ever be streetwise, spontaneous, independent, fierce women that I want them to be if I overprotect them? So I had to learn to let go of my fears of protection. So age 15, with her fake ID, with her friends, she was clubbing and she was going out and doing things. But I've always told them, listen, whatever happens, if you're drunk, stoned, you're just scared of any situation, it doesn't matter, just phone us and we'll come and get you. And they know that, and we have done that. So I think it's best to be as honest as possible with my kids, and just to, not to scare them, but to let them know what can take place, to have some wits about them, but not blaming them if anything did happen. But to let them live their life. I want them to be spontaneous. I don't want to hold them back in any way. I want them to be independent, self-confident women, and they're all great. I would say that though. I'm their mum.
So it's such a good point though, because as a parent myself to daughters, I'm very blunt and I say things that can happen, and it's because it has happened to you and because you're trying to not to overcompensate.
Mm-hmm.
What am I trying to say? Because you're trying not to overcompensate. It must be just difficult to have to overthink what your advice is and how, because you're seeing it through your eyes of how you would receive that information. And of course, they're teenage girls.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, the very first time Anna got really, really drunk, and I told her, just phone us. And so when she was phoning home, it was her friends that were stopping her from calling us. And, they didn't want her to get into trouble because she was paralytic. She was only about 14 at the time. And so eventually we got her home and she was just saying, I told you my mum would come. I told you she would come. So they're really okay about it. They know that it's, once she got very, very drunk, she then suddenly sort of goes, your mum, anything could have happened to me. I said, it's not just you could be attacked. I said, you could have got run over. She opened her purse, all her money spilled. You could have been mugged, anything. And she saw, that it was, it came from a place of care. But I don't want to stop them from going out drinking. They should be able to go out and drink. They should be able to go out and party, because it's not about what you were drinking. It's not about what you were wearing. So I've never said to them, you can't go out dressed like that. They can go out dressed however they like, because they're not inviting anything in, because it's never ever the victim's fault.
I say that when the subject comes to mental health, I want to normalize the conversation around mental health. My thinking is that we are all on a scale of 1 to 100, whether you're even,
at some point in their life,
and even to different degrees, whether you're hungover or just annoyed at the children or sleep deprived on one end, to clinical depression and suicide attempt being right at the other. I mean, you were there.
Yeah, I have been.
What I know, a lot of people, including myself, that have had nothing of what you've been through, but trials and tribulations, I suppose, that are personal to the individual.
But it's not about comparison, because I truly believe it's what we do with what happens to us. It's not what happens to us that's important, because it's what you do with it. So, as a therapist, I could work with two people that have both lost their father, for example. One would just be so grateful that they'd had that dad. I'm so blessed, he was a great father. Another one could say, I'm never going to get over that. I'm always going to be grief-stricken. So we can have very similar situations and come out very differently. So it all depends really what you do with it. So I never compare stories. I don't, when people say, oh, I've never had anything quite as bad as you, it doesn't matter. It's not a competition.
No, but I know that it is a hole. And when you're at the bottom of that hole, people are saying, oh, snap out of it, get out of it, move on. No, but you can't even, I think my problem, a lot of people's problem, is that you don't sort of give yourself permission to try and get better. I think you find solitude in the fact that and you're comfortable in this mire that you're in. And there must be a point where you want better, where you accept that you want to accept more for yourself.
Yeah.
And you see maybe a glimpse of light at the end, which becomes quite addictive when you look at self-improvement, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In my case, I was driving down the road and I started singing to a song, and I thought, I haven't sung to a song in weeks. I'm taking that as I might be starting to feel better. What was the road to recovery like for you? I know your husband played a great part.
So I really, the moment that he asked me, we'd been married for 3 years then, how about starting a family again? And I was just all ready to say, no way, why I can't do that. But it was just a moment that came to me, and I thought, if I don't do it, they've won. I'm giving them all my power and control over my life, and they've got no idea for a start, but I didn't want them to have that power and control over my life. And so I came up with this plan that I call my best revenge, that not only was I going to become a mum, but I was going to live my life as best as I could, and I just refused to be identified by what had happened to me. So that started me on my healing journey. Obviously, I had my 3 girls, and I thought that was it. I was healed, I was okay. But it's like an onion, therapy or working ourselves. There's many layers, we just have to peel another one back. And there was a combination of events. I was studying psychotherapy, I was doing tons of personal development, and Anna turned 13. So that brought back loads of memories. And I really had convinced myself that I was okay, I was healed. But we're very good at convincing ourselves of lots of things. We can put on a mask and say that we're fine, but I still really live I lived my life from a place of fear. It affected lots of things, but I just got very good at covering it up. So I set out to challenge all my fears, all the situations that would normally scare me. I went out of my way to do things that I would have avoided. So once I challenged my fears, I realized that my fears were just my imagination. They weren't real. Everything that I was worried about had already happened, or I was worried about might happen. So none of it in that moment was happening there and then. So that really helped me to dilute my fears, really, and make them disappear. So I've gone from living my life as this really scared person to kind of just, fearless, I guess now, do things that I would never have done before.
It's lovely to hear you say that. You say challenge your fears. I say I beat the bully when I beat my own mind.
Yes.
My mind, I found it so nauseous that my mind kept telling me not to do stuff, that I just used to challenge it on a day-to-day basis and just prove that it was wrong. And it kind of gives you superpowers then, because this inner critic is irrelevant and useless.
Yeah, the mind is really interesting, isn't it? Because at some point it had to shut me down to protect me. And then it brought my memories back, even though I didn't believe it, but it's trying to tell me that you're ready to face it now. But I mean, what is our mind? We can't cut it open. It doesn't bleed. You know, it's a very mysterious thing. And after a while I saw it wasn't helping me. It was keeping me trapped in all these old patterns and habits. So by challenging it, I realized, I don't need to listen to it all the time. You know, it wasn't always my friend.
So let me ask you then, how did you turn pain into positivity?
I just think I have always been driven to clean up. You know, once I realized that I'm not my body, I'm not the things that were done to me, I'm so much more than the sum of one night. I was just determined to be the best me that I could. I was very fortunate, I don't know if I mentioned it to you before, my dad was a Holocaust survivor, and he lost his mum and his dad and his brothers and sisters. Only a sister and a brother survived. His youngest brother was only 6 years old, and they were all gassed. They all died in Auschwitz, all murdered there. And my dad wasn't really by what he said, but by how he lived his life. I always saw every day that, you know, if he can recover from that, then surely I can recover from this. He was, I guess, my greatest teacher. You know, he showed me that life is for living, that we can move on from the most unbelievable, horrible circumstances. I mean, I know I say we shouldn't compare, but to have your whole family wiped out and taken out of your home and forced to wear yellow stars and work in a, labor camp, it is unimaginable really from our generation, but it was only my next generation away. I'm only second generation survivor, so it wasn't that long ago for me. He just showed me that life is for living and we can get past anything if we choose to.
You don't get a lot worse than that, really, to be fair, do you? What would your message be? Everyone comes across adversity. Some people hide the fact and say that they don't, but everyone does. That's part of being a human. If we took the actual incident out, whether it be what you went through or someone losing their business or grief or whatever it was, take it out, what would be your message of how to bounce back? Do you box it? Do you forget it? Do you celebrate it?
Actually, when my memories returned and I was going for therapy, I was the worst client because I told them I wanted them to take the pictures away. I don't want to see it anymore. I don't want to think about it. So I wanted to still stuff it down inside. But then I realized actually, for me to really, really learn to be okay with my past, I have to face my past. And that was when I did the most difficult therapy I've ever done, because every week I would go and tell them about another part of it or another scene. And over time, it just took the sting out of the energy that gets locked in with the trauma. I had to find a way to accept all that was done to me. So the way in was always the way out. The avoidance, the denial was actually what was driving me crazy at the end of the day. It wasn't the memories or the pictures. It was my refusing to believe that had happened to me. Because lots of my memories came back to me in my dream state. I would wake up at night having nightmares and I would see lots of new information. And I thought, well, surely if it was that bad, I'd remember that. Now I understand that your mind shuts off and it comes back when it thinks it's ready. And if I was going to make anything up, why would I make that up? You know, I would choose to make anything else up rather than that. So acceptance was my key, really, to letting everything go. Acceptance all alongside forgiveness and understanding. That really just helped me just to go, okay, so they didn't kill me. I am still alive. What am I going to do with my life?
Letting go is a whole thing. It's a whole podcast on its own, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
And I suppose you've got to be...
Forgiveness allowed me to let go.
Right.
It really did.
So that forgiveness was part of the process of going back in.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, the forgiveness was part of the understanding and compassion for them, which I never, you know, when they were dehumanizing me, they're only dehumanizing themselves. And I wondered, you know, why weren't they connected into their source, their goodness, their light? Because I don't believe anybody is born guilty. We are all born innocent babies. I've never looked at an evil baby in my life when I've ever seen a baby. So, yeah, I wondered how they got so corrupted at such a young age.
I was listening to one of your videos or interviews before this, doing some research. And I think you were away in distant country somewhere, and someone had the audacity to say to you, they weren't born rapists. And your reaction right then was very similar to what you've just said then. You were completely the opposite. How dare you? You know, it's almost as if it took something away from the tragedy.
Yeah, well, it was my therapist who suggested it to me at the end of therapy, and I was so angry, but then it planted this little seed in my head, and then that seed just grew and grew, and I was like, but how could they be rapists? What you know, and then that just started me on this journey of wanting to understand.
So now you're smiling and better, you're an advocate for positivity. I know that when asked what motivates you in life, you say life itself. Yeah. I've seen it. I mean, what do you mean? Are you just happy to be here? Do you wake up with intent every morning?
Yeah, I'm not going to say I don't have days that are difficult as well. You know, that would be lying. It's not 100% perfect all the time, no. Especially currently in lockdown. Going from an empty house to having 4 adults around the whole time is interesting. It has its own challenges. But yeah, on the whole, you know, it sounds very odd. I would never undo now what happened to me. I would never wish it on anybody, but it taught me a lot. You know, they actually helped me to be grateful, because they attempted to kill me 2 or 3 times during the event, and I'm grateful that I have my life. I'm grateful that I didn't die. I know a lot of people aren't as lucky. They will be raped and murdered. It's not uncommon. Within the first 3 weeks of lockdown, the numbers of domestic abuse have doubled, and 14 women and 2 children have died in 3 weeks.
Have they really?
They've been murdered by their partners. Because home is not always a safe place for everybody. If you're then locked in an abusive situation, it's a nightmare for a lot of people right now. So I realised that I'm lucky that I came out of my life, and I'm not going to waste it. I'm going to live my life. And I try not to take life too seriously, even though there is a very, very serious side of life. But yeah, I'm good. I've got a lot to be grateful for. And
good on you. And it surprised me then when you said if you could change anything, if you could change it, you wouldn't. I hear that quite a lot, actually, because it shaped you, and now it's shaped your daughters.
And it's a paradox, really, because it's shaped me, and then it's not who I am as well. You know, I'm more than that. I'm more than one in my life, but obviously it had a huge impact on my life. So it's a weird kind of phenomenon. But yeah, I wonder where I would be if it hadn't happened to me. You know, what would I be doing with my life? It really kind of woke me up that life is for living, and I'm going to live it.
Good. And I hear a lot about the higher vibration, which is when you're down and you're low and you attract all that negative energy. So it sort of self-propels and it confirms your environment around you.
Yeah.
Looking at you now, you're on the higher vibration. You've had amazing things happen in your life, haven't you, with the traveling and the interviews?
Yeah, so I used to call myself an accidental speaker, but I gave up working as a psychotherapist about a year ago to focus on speaking. It was actually this time last year, my first international event. I went to South Africa. I've been to a few different countries to speak, and I just don't know how it's going to look in the future, whether I'll be speaking in front of an audience again. I don't know, whether it'll be virtual. But yeah, I just feel that if I can speak out, then I should. And I don't just want to speak out for people that have experienced rape or sexual abuse, but for anyone to know their own strength, to find their own courage, to find their voice, because we're all so much stronger than we think we are. We all have resources internally. We just have to learn to tap into them and to use them as best as we can.
Yeah, I could listen. I was quiet. I could have listened to that for ages. I was thinking, because when you take it away from your situation, you put it into everyone else starts then relating it to theirs. And I was like that then, you know, finding the courage and speaking out.
Yeah. It's really hard initially to find your voice, whatever your issue is, to say that I'm struggling or I need help or this doesn't feel right. There's a real imbalance going on in me and I'm struggling. But once we can verbalize it, we can get good feedback, we give it oxygen, it just lightens everything so much. It really helps to speak about it because it shifts the energy inside of us as well.
Madeleine, part of what Wellity wants to do is be able to give you a platform to share your story to more people, so that they can hear, because everyone has trials of tribulations and deals with adversity. And you are a shining example of how you can move, you don't use that phrase, move on, because I know you probably have, and you haven't moved on in different ways. But if I was in the audience or someone was in the audience going through their own adversity that was unconnected to what you've been through, what would they take away from listening to you?
I'd like to think hope. I'd like to think that they can look at me and realize, well, if she can survive all of that and live a great life, then surely I can do the same as well. You know, it gives people possibilities, and we don't need to hold on to hate. Hate can always be transformed into something better. And somebody once told me an acronym for hope, which I just thought was brilliant, and it is hold on, pain ends. And I just think it's perfect.
Hold on, pain ends.
Yeah. So, you know, everything is going to pass. It's not going to rain forever. The sun has to come out eventually. It's the same, you know, right now what we're all going through, this is going to pass one day. It could take years to recover, obviously, but this will pass as well. We're not going to be in lockdown forever. So it's just always knowing that this will pass.
When you're going through hell, keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly what I had to do when it was the avoiding and the denying, refusing to believe it. That was actually causing me more distress than the actual pictures themselves.
Yeah,
so the way in is always the way out, always.
I can feel that nervous energy even when you talk about it. So your words, I believe it was on one of your videos, heal the past, live the present, dream the future. How do you believe positive thinking can frame your future?
I don't really think about it anymore. I just kind of do it now. Well, I guess everything is your attention. Everything is your energy. It's where are you putting your energy? Where are you putting your focus? If I was to put my focus in the past all the time, I think I'd still have one foot in the past. You know, if I know that it's possible to heal and live a great life, you can recover after any trauma. That's where I'm putting my energy. I'm just taking it day at a time, just going with the flow and just enjoying it.
I heard something that depression was in the past. You'll know a lot more than me about this. Depression was in the past. Anxiety is worrying about the future. Well-being can be found in the present, because that's all you can actually control. Yeah.
Well, anxiety, worrying, it doesn't get you anywhere. It's like sitting in a rocking chair for hours. You can move in, but you're not really doing anything, are you? So it's a difficult one to get past, but it's recognizing when your own resources aren't enough, then you need help from someone to go and to work it.
The definition of well-being, we're coming almost to the end now, and I'm keen to get your opinion on this. The definition of well-being is different for everyone. Mm-hmm. What does well-being mean for you? What does, and I do this, what does that mean to you?
For me, it really means that I'm not impacted or overwhelmed or have any distressing thoughts, images about my past in any way. That I can really be right now in this moment with you on a Zoom chat. Yes, I can hear my phone ringing there, but I'm ignoring that. But, you know, just to live as much as I can in the moment, to be physically fit, because I really like to be back in my body after being kicked out for many years, so that I can be grounded. So I do a lot of weightlifting, I do karate, I'm a windsurfer, I do yoga, I
Wow.
walk every day. So I like to feel strong mind, strong body. I can, I just like to lift heavy stuff off the ground. So to me, it's being connected to my body and having peace in my mind.
All right, now we've just a slight tangent because you've got me on sport. I love my sport. I love my gym. Obviously, the gyms are shut, so I had to take up something else, which has been running. Done 200 kilometers almost this month, 650 so much this year. This year. But to me, it's not running. To me, it's time out, fresh air, music in, no apps pinging, no phone. So I don't call it. I look at the benefits of it, which
you
is
have to find whatever works for you. I was a runner. I ran for years. I've done many marathons, but I realized when I was running physically, I was running emotionally as well. So it was great for long distance, but I wasn't in my body. And my whole journey has been getting my memories back and getting back in, because I just felt hollow. I just felt like this empty space, never connected into my body. So karate and weightlifting, if I'm deadlifting twice my body weight, I have to be able to be in my feet, in my legs, in my strength, in my core, in my breath. You can't just pick it up off the ground. You've got to really be connected in. So that's why I like being strong.
And sport is different for everyone. So you can go to the gym like we do, or a lot of people go to CrossFit or something like that because they like the community bit of it as well.
I'm too old for CrossFit. I just get too injured. They're all like in their 20s and they're like too fast.
If you're deadlifting that, that's...
Yeah.
What emphasis do you place on sport then and exercise?
Every day. Lockdown this morning, I've already done. My trainer has got an amazing app, so he's sending home workouts, and so I've done a session with him, and I've set myself a challenge. I don't know if it'll ever happen at nearly 55 to do the splits while I'm in lockdown. So I'm working with a YouTube video every day so I can learn to do the splits. I'm getting nearer to the ground, but not quite there comfortably.
When you do, can you tell us?
I'll tell everyone.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, and then every other day I'll do a yoga video for an hour as well. So yeah, I do something every day, and another most afternoons.
Oh, I think it's just hugely linked between physical well-being and mental well-being.
And I think, when I had male clients, when I worked as a therapist, I would really encourage them to move, because I think when we physically move, we can move that stuckness inside. When we stay stuck and introverted and closed off, when we move, if we can build up a sweat, you get your breath going faster, your blood's flowing, it can send different thoughts and feelings around our body. So it doesn't matter what you do, even if it's just dancing with the broom in the kitchen, but do something 10 minutes a day, just move your body. Because when you're dancing or something, you can't think of anything else if you're really in the dance. If you're really in your run, that's it. You're just focusing on one foot music, fresh air. And everything else is gone in that moment. So it's so good at bringing you in when you move.
Someone said you will never ever feel bad after a run. You'll never feel worse after a run than you did before. And that's...
You never regret doing it. You might go, oh, can't be bothered today. But once you've done it, you go, yes, I did that run.
You love that feeling after a full gym set, don't you? When you come out,
absolutely.
You have a sense of accomplishment.
Yeah.
And that, I suppose, is in real time. You've done it in real time. You're feeling the benefits of it instantly.
Yeah.
You're very present in that moment.
Yeah, my daughter and I, we made a boot camp in our garden yesterday. We went to look around the house, all the gym equipment that we had. We had a BOSU, a pull-up bar, a TRX, kettlebells, dumbbells, skipping ropes, resistance bands. I think we could actually open a gym here. So we had our own little circuit in the back garden. It was good fun.
I bet it was. It sounds it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madeleine. It was again, I don't know what the term is. I don't know if you come across this a lot. Was it nice to hear your story? I don't know. It was certainly nice to hear your bounce back and resilience and see how you changed mentally. It was a bit of a conscious decision once you'd done it, powered by exercise and sport and support from your other half and your daughters. So it was a bit of a team effort.
We always have a choice. We always can make our own choices. And it was a choice. It was a choice for me to decide to heal, and a choice to let go of it all, and a choice to choose forgiveness. So we always have choices.
If you're strong enough to make them, and you found your strength in the end.
But you can build on that. You can have the intention and you can build on that. So there's always choices. We choose every day what mood we're going to be in.
I completely agree with that. You can wake up and you can overrule the system sometimes.
Yep.
When it says, oh, I can't be, but go out, do some exercise, follow a routine,
Yep.
and don't rely on that instant moment that you think, today's not going to be a good day, I'll write it off.
Yeah, I remember I did one of my very first talks. There was a lovely guy called George who I've remained friends with, and he spoke to me at the end. He was ex-British Army, and he said to me this one sentence which was lovely: every day may not be good, but there is good in every day. So just look for the good. Just put your energy for the good and you'll find it.
So Madeleine, where do people find you? How can people digest more of your content? Book you? How do they?
I have a website, madelineblack.co.uk, which is about to change. That was really an author's website, but it's going to be a speaker's one soon. I'm on social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, 2 Facebook pages, Twitter. So I'm all over. Yeah.
And I hear you've got a book.
I have a book called Unbroken, which has been out 3 years. And just last week, it became an audio book. And hopefully very soon I can reveal some more information about my book. I'm not allowed to say anything yet, so that'll be exciting.
Right, but people might be able to download that
at
some point. Right, good. And we'll make it our aim to get your story shared by as many people as possible. It's been an
and I do TEDx as well. They could find my TEDx Glasgow.
Yeah, that's the first thing that comes up actually when you search you. It's been an absolute pleasure. It really has. I can't thank you enough for your time. We'll do as much as we can to share your story, and it's been a privilege to hear your journey.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it too.